Hi everyone, it's your boy Zach, and I was gonna review Absolute Batman, uh, Batman, uh, Batmant. He's part bat, he's part man, he's part ant. He's Batmant. Batman issue 4. But then yesterday I got like a million messages. They're like, "Are you gonna cover this Neil Gaiman thing? Are you gonna cover it?" And I was like, "Why is everyone like?" I've reviewed like two of his books ever, and then I remembered, oh yeah, he came after me. It was kind of a thing back in the day. So anyway, I'm watching Iron Claw. Uh, yeah, here's my watch list. Zach has terrible taste in movies. Like, these are good movies. Elektra is obviously an acquired taste, but there's some fun parts to it. Yeah, my taste in movies is so bad. But anyway, so there was an article on like the night before, and then the article right here. Now, it's funny. It's not on a paywall today, but it was yesterday. So I used remove paywall, but it was so long. Like, it goes on forever. And the other thing is that this information came out earlier this year, like in a series of blogs. The thing is, all of the incidents, like they already talked about, at least in the first half of this, it just gave, I would say, excessive detail to every incident. And as far as I know, there still hasn't been any kind of indictment or arrest. Uh, I wasn't going to cover it because everybody was just acting like shitheads. I forgot to get it ready. Like Mags and Joe Glass, they seem to believe the allegations, but then made it all about themselves. If you believe the allegations, then there's actual women on Earth who are victims, and that. But no, they're like, this hurts me so much. I'm such a fan. I don't know if I could read his books. It's like, that's not really the problem here. If you believe the allegations, the anti-SJWs didn't seem to believe the allegations, but also felt comfortable in acting as if they were true, and they were doing their usual Eddie Haskell type of situation. So this is a while ago now. This is like 2018. So there was actually a Bleeding Cool article about it way back in the day. So I don't really have much to say about this. Like I'm saying, if there's an issue, bring it to trial, and it apparently isn't going to trial. But September 14th, when Richard Meyer tried to Gaimansplain Neil Gaiman over his own career. Now, this also is a very long article. Actually, it wasn't that. I was trying. It's very small letters, so when I was reading it right before this, I was trying to. But I'll do the. Well, let's see if it jogs my memory. From my memory, and I haven't thought about this in years. Actually, no, I think about it every time he's mentioned, but he doesn't get mentioned very much. So what happened is Eve Ewing had gotten Ironheart. I know there's stuff on the screen. I'm looking away from the screen right now. And I made the point that she got it because of the way she asked for it. She did God, I should have gotten this ready. There was a poll, like in December or November, December of 2017, where she said, let me write this character because I have the same hairstyle, and I'm from Chicago, and I'm a black woman, even though she was like in her 30s. She was twice as old as a character. Whatever. She really emphasized the hairstyle, like showed a picture of herself and a picture of Riri. And then, like, we all knew, even though the poll didn't get like as many signatures that it was. I guess it's a petition, not a poll. We all knew she was going to get it. And then it was announced, and it didn't come out like for a long time. And then when it came out, it was kind of clear why it took so long, because while she can write, and unlike Vita Ayala and Danny Lore and Gabby Rivera, this is of the time, she's not retarded, learning disabled, autistic. Like, she can write, but she just can't write comics. Like, so she kind of wrote like kind of a first issue, but not really. It just kind of ended. And then there was like essentially a writing exercise. It was just Riri and her kind of boyfriend just kind of hanging out. And you're like, yeah, this is like a writing exercise. Like this, you know. And like, it was okay. It wasn't terrible, but like, you know, we made the point. Like, this is crazy. People are being hired because of their hairstyles. And then Neil Gaiman, and it was like this was like, right when Me Too was becoming a thing. It was kind of obvious, like it's like, like he was trying to get this reputation, like, I'm defending all women, defending black women. Weirdly enough, it seems like black women are safe from him. Just moving on. So let's actually look at the screen and see what it says. Last week, there was a bit of Comicsgate howl of rage against a decision by Marvel to hire academic writer and visual artist Eve L. Ewing to write Ironheart, the new ongoing series starring Riri Williams, with the thrust of the message being that no one gets hired to write an ongoing comic series at Marvel or DC without previous comic book experience. I forgot that aspect. Unless it's, you understand. Unless it's through some PC quota pandering bullshit. And it's just not fair. I'm not going to quote those tweets. I'm sure you can imagine them well enough. Jesus Christ, man. This is this Voldemort shit. Like back then, like they literally talked about me like I was a demon from hell. Like we can't quote him directly, or your tablet will melt with hellfire. It's insanity. But it did inspire the likes of Neil Gaiman to point out that he was hired to write Black Orchid for DC Vertigo without having any published comic books at the time. Comicsgate instigator Richard Meyer objected to this, pointing out that Neil Gaiman had comics published before Black Orchid was published. Gaiman kindly and semi-patiently answered this attempt at Gaimansplaining by pointing out that the painted work of Dave McKean on Black Orchid and the pages of Violent Cases they had shown Karen Berger took a long time to create, and they had to finish Violent Cases first. Now, I'm not going to do a whole thing, just you can go read this article. It takes a while, and it refers to some dead links because I stopped having a Twitter like a few months later. But suffice it to say that everyone was attacking me because that was the style at the time, just as it is at the time right now, just from the opposite side. And there was a lot of, I got hired with no resume. And Joe Quesada's like, I just walked into DC and got hired, except for, like, he did that long interview with Mark Millar earlier this year. And he worked at Valiant for months. But I think it was like he worked there and then he took a break and they worked there again. So he had a portfolio. Like, you're not, I just walked in and just got hired. You walked in with a portfolio of working at another company in the same city at the same time, where everybody hangs out together. And they're like, there's this new guy, Joe Quesada. Hey, he's okay. He's getting better. Like, it was just so much. Like, everyone's like, I got hired with no experience. No, they all worked somewhere else before. So the situation was, you had a woman hired because of her skin color, from Chicago, hairstyle, with no previous experience, and it just had happened with Gabby Rivera. But all these people who worked places before Marvel and DC is like, same thing happened to me. That's the standard. You just get hired by Marvel or DC with no experience, except for they all had experience beforehand. It was ridiculous. It was just gaslighting, and it was Gaimansplaining from Gaiman. Apparently, at the time, even though I had read, since I started reading interviews in 1988, it always happened the same way. You start with blogs or zines. You get like whatever indie work you can find. You do that for a while. You send stuff. Like, it was a standard trajectory, and all of a sudden there was a non-standard trajectory, which is just be black, be gay, be a lesbian, be trans, and just you're in. And then all of these white people are like, no, it's the same as me, except for all of them worked someplace beforehand. Like, all of them did. So Gaiman started to do this thing where he started to try and fudge the timeline. He's like, well, no, it looks like that, but actually, and then he just started just to muddy things a little, just to make things a little fuzzy. But like, I think I'm in here. So yes, this is Comic Book DB before they obliterated it. And not trying to say, I'm just saying, I used to use. Okay, so when I start the channel, I'm using Comic-Con sales reports as a source to make arguments. That gets obliterated. I'm using Comic Book DB as a source, an objective, agreed upon source to make arguments. That gets bought up and then nothing done with it. It's just shut down. And then they had that, what is it, League of Comics Geeks. And there was a page there where you could go to a creator and see how many work assignments they had. Especially, people with like Stephanie Phillips with no talent, no sales, no fans. Like 200 work assignments. That function, out of all the functions, is removed. I don't know. I'm just saying. So I say Comic Book DB shows you as having 2 years of indie credits before getting hired by DC to write Black Orchid. He says, no, it shows me as having indie credits before the publication of Black Orchid. You don't just get hired by DC on the same day they publish it. Just being condescending as fuck. Oh, they don't hire you and publish the book on the same day. Fuck off. Piece of shit. You don't get hired by DC on the same day they publish the first part of a 144-page fully painted comic. Comics take a long time to write and to paint. So I said, like, this is my whole profile. When did you write your first published comic? 2000 AD, issue number 488, from September 20th, 1986. I think this is League of Comics Geeks. He says, "Yup, it was published shortly after I was hired by DC. You seem to be arguing with a tweet you haven't entirely understood, and I guess that tweet is this one. In the kindest possible way, this is ignorant twaddle. I was hired by DC, having not published any comics yet, with 3 published short stories to my credit. I had a journalism background, so they knew I understood deadlines. But they liked my pitches and my enthusiasm, and they took a chance." So he's playing this game where he's like, oh, they started talking to me before the books I had published were out, except for he would have the scripts. He would have the pages. And he would tell them, oh yeah, I've got all these stuff coming out. It's a completely different situation than Gabby Rivera. Healthy at every size, Latino lesbian, mask, as they say, masculine. I don't see any of them fighting in Ukraine, though. All those masks, and none of them are, in Ukraine. Have you seen that knife fight video between the Ukrainian and the, what is he like? He's the other guy is basically an Eskimo. He's like so far to the east in Russia. It's just, it's like 8 minutes long. And it's just brutal. But so he starts playing this word game of like, twaddle. I'm saying stuff in my head because, it's all allegedly type of stuff, Okay, I'm done saying it. Just being a little petty and mean. But, so he started like, this... He's playing games with the production cycle just as Joe Quesada did, where it's like, I got hired and they didn't know anything about me. They had drinks with the same people who worked at the same company. So you're saying you went to an interview and didn't mention any of your experience. Okay, so let's change it to experience. That Gabby Rivera and Eve Ewing. So I would say like published comics. And they're playing this little dickhead game of it's like, publish, well, the publish. Experience. Experience writing, drawing, and producing comics. You all had it. Every single person joining in on a digital lynch mob against me had it. And were lying. They were all lying. They were all playing games. And you see why, Neil has all these issues, and apparently it's not just one time, it's an ongoing thing. It's multiple people, and he's watching Me Too bubble up. So he's like, oh, I've got to be the defender of the blacks, the black females, the Shebas, or whatever they would call them. um, uh, and this is just a bunch of bullshit. With this Eddie Haskell. Oh, good golly gosh! You said published, and I'm going to pretend I don't understand. That would also entail doing all the work, having all of the experience to get published. So I'm expected to believe that Joe Quesada went into DC without a portfolio of all of his Valiant work, without mentioning it, and in a tight-knit industry that at the time, basically everybody, except for a few indies, were in New York City, and they all used to hang out with each other and date each other and go work to all these different places and run into each other and be roommates and share studios. Nobody knew that Joe Quesada had experience. He just walked in. Hey, I'm a guy with a pompadour, and I'm kind of vaguely Hispanic. They're like, you're hired. No, of course. Of course he showed his pages. Of course he mentioned all of his work experience. Fucking ridiculous. And we're supposed to guess. They're like, this guy Neil Gaiman, he's a journalist. He would understand. No, they didn't hire him because he was a journalist. Let's just find random journalists in the UK and hire them to write DC Comics. Fuck out of here. They went over there, because Alan Moore and other people, they were becoming popular. They wanted to hire them for American comics. And they talk to people and they say, hey, who's, and Neil Gaiman, they're over there. And he's like, I can talk about all this stuff I have in the works. Hasn't come out yet. But, he's interviewing Alan Moore. He knows these people. They're all hugged up like ticks. But we're supposed to goo goo gaga where whatever, Karen Berger or whatever is like, Do you have a list of just the journalists? Because I know they're good at deadlines. Okay, there, that one. Gaiman, Neil. Can somebody ring him? Nobody's heard of him. He hasn't interviewed Alan Moore. He doesn't have several books in with multiple publishers in the UK where I'm at right now. He's just a random journalist we picked because we liked his curly hair. Give me a fucking break. And that's what this was. This was all just public relations. This was just, fuck, they got this Me Too thing. Oh, shit. Can't pay them all off. Fuck. Married to one, she'll probably keep quiet. Oh, let me be super feminist and just bullshit. And then I think one time I mentioned the Wikipedia, and I'm like, how come I'm literally using the Wikipedia, and it's unchanged for like a decade. And he's like, I'm trusting Wikipedia. And I'm like, I remember going back a few months later to his like alternate version that he gave just here. It's not in any of the other. If I remember correctly, there was even like a page from one of those like compendia of Sandman where he went through, how he had gotten into comics, where it's like, I made this comic and they liked it, so they showed interest, and all of a sudden they don't know anything about it. They just thought he was a journalist who knew deadlines. And so I was like, what about this Sandman book published by DC that said this timeline that you are now denying 20 years later? He's like, that was wrong. So every single published version of the way he got into the industry, it's bringing back a lot of trauma. Every single part was wrong. But nobody corrected it afterwards. Nobody said, like, DC hired him because he was a journalist who knew deadlines. And then later they found out he had made like 6 comics that everyone they're talking to knew he was also making. So he interviewed and just never mentioned it ever. And just all these, just the bandwagon. I'm getting it now from the freaking anti-SJWs. I mean, I'm basically the Rorschach of comics. Just a middle finger up to both sides. None of you have any heart. None of you have any integrity. You don't give a fuck about anything. Fucking Christ. Give me a break. This was bullshit. And this was basically like every day of my life back then. They were absolutely trying to get me to kill myself. That's why I hate when these videos, it's like, they want to kill us, they want to kill me. It's like, you're literally begging for their attention. This was like every single day for a year and a half. Just being dogpiled and maligned. And I was right. And all the incorrect sources, none of them have been corrected. None of them have been updated. None of them have been changed. Because everyone at the time knew Neil Gaiman was lying. Every single one of them. Gail Simone and Joe Quesada and all these fucking pieces of shit. I walked in off the street and was hired on the spot. Fuck off. No, you weren't. You went to conventions. You went out to bars. Joe Quesada and Jimmy Palmiotti said one of the main things that like really helped their careers, they were the party guys. There was a bar that they didn't co-own it, but they kind of did. I guess the bar just loved them and let them do whatever. They handed me a pencil and I said, "What's this? I've never seen this before." Fuck the hell off. Let me read the entire thing. I walked in off the street and was hired on the spot by DC as a penciler off of my first attempt at sample pages. I did 3 months of coloring at Valiant that they never asked, knew, nor cared about, and my track record as a penciler was a single Nintendo pinup. Yeah, it happens. No, fuck off. You had industry experience. You had experience with deadlines. You knew people. You partied with people. You were a known entity with comic book industry experience. This is a completely different situation than Gabby Rivera, than Eve L. Ewing. Get it? It's like evil Eve L. Ewing. Eve Ewing, whatever. And this was every day of my life. And it was meant to ostracize me and malign me. And Joe Quesada, this fat piece of shit, actively participated in multiple digital lynch mobs that were meant to drive me to kill myself. Fuck, that shit makes me angry. Funny thing is, I didn't even realize at the time. I was just like, this sucks. This fucking sucks. It was only after like a year and a half. It was something crazy. It was like the 30th hit piece. Not all of them were entirely about me, but I was mentioned in like 30 hit pieces. And I was like, the Boston Bomber. You know what I mean? They weren't talking about him a year and a half after the bomb. You know, sometimes here and there. But it wasn't like a daily event. Hey, remember the Boston Bomber? Yeah, we remember him. We just bring him up like every 3 days. And I was like, oh. They're trying to get me to kill myself. They're trying to ostracize me and put me into a pit of despair. So I see only one option, and it's so fucking obvious. I'm not gonna, do a kangaroo court about Neil Gaiman. I'm not crazy about that there are... It's, like, if he's so bad, why do they save it up? They always, like, save this stuff up until he gets, like, a Netflix deal, or you know how the seasons are. There'll be, like, years between a season now. It's like, oh, season 2 is like, oh, he did this in a bathtub 20 years ago. It's like, why didn't you bring it up in the ensuing 20 years? And I'm hearing there's this, like, oh, he was too big to fail. It's like, come on. Trump he's going to trial like 3 weeks before becoming the president again. Like Martha Stewart went to jail. Like Ivan Boesky. Like, don't give me this bullshit that the writer of Coraline was too powerful for international law enforcement. Like, come on. No, it's these people knew or they suspected, but he was on their side, so they covered for him. He said complete, total, and utter bullshit that he was hired without any knowledge of his experience, even though he had a bunch of books in the works in the UK with the people they were talking to. Not even, of course, it's the first thing he's going to mention. And he's going to show the pages. Hey, I've got this thing, Dave McKean, like, check out these pages. Check out this script. Like, he had experience. Yes, I said publishing, and my point is experience. Eve L. Ewing and Gabby Rivera were not hired for experience, they were hired for identity. Neil Gaiman was not hired for identity. I don't even like calling this apples and oranges because apples and oranges are both fruits. They're in the same category. This isn't even the same category. One is a clear-cut case of diversity hiring. The other is standard career path. You network. You work for free. You work for a reduced rate. You take anything you can get. You do things you don't like. You work for a company you don't think is cool. You build a resume. You build a reputation. And then you mention it in your interview. That's how you get the interview. They weren't interviewing random journalists who know about deadlines. They were interviewing established and up-and-coming creators in the UK comic book industry. And Neil Gaiman was one of them. And everybody fucking knew it back then. They were all lying. They were in a fucking digital lynch mob to get a veteran to kill himself. We already got a massive veteran suicide. Lucky for me, whatever part of the brain says, all right, do it. The synapses are too far apart, so whenever life gets really bad, I just go, oh, this fucking sucks. And I just kind of just keep doing stuff. Fuck everybody. I got a middle finger. Screw that one up. Middle finger for the left and the right. You have no heart. You have no integrity. You don't give a fuck about anything. You don't even like yourself. God damn. Read some comics, you fucking assholes. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.